Time to put that museum piece away, Grandma. This is a job for men, not a field trip for relics. The voice, dripping with the arrogant authority of a career spent behind a desk, belonged to Brigadier General Alistair Finch. He reached for Eleanor Vance's custom Macmillan TC-50, his polished fingers aiming to dismiss a lifetime of expertise in one condescending gesture. He saw a frail, 65-year-old woman, but what he failed to see was the dormant predator he was about to awaken. Before I tell you exactly how she responded to that fatal misjudgment, make sure you hit that subscribe button and drop a comment telling us where you're watching from. Now let's get into it. The air inside the makeshift briefing room at Forward Operating Base Ares tasted of cold metal, cordite, and the ever-present, talcum-like dust of the Afghan highlands. The only thing that cut through the grit was the aroma of burnt coffee from a machine that had been running since the initial invasion. Tense-faced men from SEAL Team 5 and the 75th Ranger Regiment were scattered around a table layered with satellite maps. Their quiet intensity a stark contrast to the nervous energy of the general's entourage. In the corner, sitting apart from the others, was Eleanor Hawkeye Vance. At 65, she was an anomaly, a ghost from a bygone era of warfare summoned back to this modern battlefield. Her silver hair was pulled back in a severe, practical bun, and her face was a roadmap of fine lines, each one etched by a sunrise viewed through a scope. She was cleaning her rifle, a heavily customized Macmillan TC-50, with the focused, unhurried movements of a watchmaker. The weapon was as much a relic as she was in the eyes of some. No flashy digital scopes or integrated systems, just perfectly balanced, hand-tooled steel and glass, maintained to a standard that bordered on obsession. Every operator in the room, men half her age with twice the modern gear, gave her a wide berth. They knew the stories, whispers of impossible shots in Central America, of silent disappearances of high-value targets in Eastern Europe during the Cold War. Eleanor wasn't a product of the regular military. She was a legend from a deniable operations unit that officially never existed, a ghost whose file was a collection of blacked-out pages. She was here as a consultant, a final, authoritative voice on long-range interdiction for a mission of critical importance. At 0800 sharp, the plywood door swung open, and Brigadier General Alistair Finch swept in, followed by a coterie of aides whose pressed uniforms seemed an insult to the dust that coated everything. Finch was a man built by bureaucracy. His chest was a billboard of service ribbons, but the men who'd actually seen combat noticed the absence of a combat infantryman badge. He moved with the unearned confidence of someone who had never had his plans violently audited by enemy fire. His gaze swept the room, cataloging the operators with a dismissive air before landing on Eleanor. His eyes, small and sharp, narrowed first at her age, then at the rifle resting on the cleaning mat. It was a look she had seen 1,000 times before, from young lieutenants fresh out of West Point to seasoned colonels who believed warfare was a science that could be perfected in a PowerPoint presentation. It was the look of a man who saw a problem, a variable that didn't fit his neat equation of modern combat. He strode directly toward her, his polished boots crunching softly on the dusty floor, ignoring the senior NCOs from the SEALs and Rangers who had stood to greet him. The room temperature seemed to drop. Every man present knew that a sniper's rifle was more than a tool. It was a sacred extension of their will, a finely tuned instrument that no one else touched. Finch, however, was about to trample on that sacred ground with the full weight of his one-star authority. I was told we had the best operational assets for this mission. Finch began, his voice loud enough for the entire room to hear, though he spoke directly down at Eleanor. I wasn't aware we were running a take-your-grandmother-to-work day. A few of his aides chuckled nervously. The special operators remained stone-faced. Are those hands even steady enough to hold that thing, let alone fire it? The condescension was a physical force, designed to belittle and dominate. Master Chief Petty Officer Thorne of SEAL Team 5 took a half-step forward. General, with all due respect, Ms. Vance is the foremost expert in extreme long-range ballistics. Her counsel is... Finch cut him off with a flick of his wrist. Your respect is noted, Master Chief. But this operation requires a trigger puller, not a history lesson. This is about eliminating 6 targets with surgical precision, not reminiscing about the good old days. He then turned his attention back to Eleanor and her rifle. I'll need to inspect this weapon. We can't have faulty antiques jeopardizing the lives of my men. He said my men, as if they were his personal property. That's when he made his critical error. He reached down, his hand open, intending to grab the barrel of the Macmillan TC-50. The act was so profoundly ignorant, so deeply disrespectful, that a collective intake of breath hissed through the room. Touching a sniper's rifle without permission was the ultimate violation. But grabbing it in the middle of a pre-mission brief? It was unthinkable. Eleanor didn't flinch. She didn't show anger. Her response was instantaneous, economical, and brutally effective. As Finch's fingers closed around the barrel, she moved. It wasn't the explosive speed of a young athlete, but the terrifying efficiency of honed instinct. Her left hand shot out and clamped over his, not in a struggle, but in a precise grip. Her thumb found the pressure point on the back of his hand while her fingers locked his wrist. Simultaneously, she used his own downward momentum, twisting the heavy rifle slightly. It was a classic joint lock, a simple, elegant piece of biomechanical cruelty designed to use an opponent's own strength against them. The crack was sickeningly loud in the sudden silence. It wasn't the snap of a breaking bone. She had controlled the pressure perfectly. It was the sound of ligaments and tendons being stretched past their breaking point. General Finch let out a strangled gasp, his face instantly paling to a waxy white. His knees buckled, and he dropped into a crouch, cradling his injured hand. His security detail instinctively reached for their sidearms, but froze as every SEAL and Ranger in the room rose to their feet as one, their hands casually but pointedly resting near their own holsters. The standoff was absolute. The silence that followed was heavier than any explosion. For a full 3 seconds, the only sound was General Finch's ragged breathing. His authority had evaporated, replaced by the stark, undeniable reality of his own fragility. Eleanor Vance rose slowly to her feet, her expression unreadable. She hadn't raised her voice. She hadn't broken a sweat. She had simply enforced a boundary with the finality of a locked door. Then she spoke, her voice calm and clear, cutting through the tension. "General," she said, "you question my capability. That is your prerogative, but you will not touch my rifle." She then made him an offer, not out of arrogance, but out of a need to settle the matter definitively. "Give me 6 targets. Any range you choose, up to the maximum effective limit of this weapon system. If I miss a single one, I will accept a court-martial for striking a superior officer. But if I make all 6 shots, you will authorize my operational plan without interference, and my team will handle the overwatch." The challenge hung in the air, audacious and absolute. Finch, cradling his now swelling hand, looked up at her, his face a mask of pain and humiliation. Every operator in the room was watching him. To refuse was to admit he was wrong. To accept was to risk further public embarrassment. His pride, the very thing that had led him to this point, left him no choice. "Set it up," he bit out through gritted teeth. Word spread through the FOB like wildfire. The general versus the old woman, the living legend. Within 20 minutes, nearly 50 soldiers had gathered at a safe distance on the perimeter of the makeshift firing range, their faces a mixture of curiosity and awe. 6 steel targets, simple 12-inch circular plates, were placed by a range detail at staggering distances. 800, 1,000, 1,200, 1,400, 1,600, and finally, a single plate at 1,810 meters, well over a mile, pushing the absolute limits of the .50 BMG cartridge in the thin mountain air. The wind was a fickle enemy, gusting unpredictably down the valley. Eleanor lay prone. The Macmillan TC-50 settled into her shoulder like it was a part of her. She wasn't rushing. Her spotter, a young ranger sergeant who looked at her with undisguised reverence, called out the wind readings. She spent minutes observing, watching the dance of dust devils in the distance, feeling the subtle shifts in pressure on her cheek. This wasn't just shooting, it was a conversation with the environment. First shot, 800 meters. The rifle boomed, a deep, concussive roar. A second later, the satisfying ping of bullet on steel echoed back. Dead center. Second shot, 1,000 meters. The wind picked up. She made a minute adjustment to her scope, exhaled slowly, and squeezed. Ping. Perfect. Third and fourth shots at 1,200 and 1,400 meters followed with the same methodical precision. She was a machine. For the fifth shot, 1,600 meters, she had to account for the Coriolis effect. The Earth's rotation subtly pulling the bullet off course during its long flight. She held her breath, the crosshairs perfectly still, and fired. The wait was agonizing. 2.5 seconds later, ping. A murmur of disbelief went through the crowd of soldiers. Only one target remained. 1810 meters. A mathematical impossibility for most. She closed her eyes for a moment, then settled back behind the scope. The world narrowed to that tiny speck of steel. She waited, letting the wind speak to her one last time. The rifle fired. 3 long seconds passed. Then, faint but clear, the sound of victory rang out across the valley. Ping. For a long time, nobody moved. The crowd of soldiers stood in stunned silence, their eyes fixed on the distant, final target. General Finch, his hand now crudely wrapped by a medic, stared, his face devoid of its earlier arrogance, replaced by sheer, unadulterated shock. He had witnessed something that defied his entire understanding of the world. A world governed by regulations, age limits, and predictable outcomes. Eleanor had shown him a different world, one governed by skill, experience, and an unbreakable will. Finally, he straightened up. In a gesture that stunned everyone present, he brought his uninjured left hand up in a crisp, formal salute. It was a breach of protocol to salute an enlisted consultant, but in that moment, it was the only language he had left to express a respect that transcended rank. "Ms. Vance," he said, his voice now quiet and devoid of its bluster. "I was wrong. I apologize." He said it publicly, in front of every soldier. "I have never seen marksmanship like that in my 30 years of service." He then turned to his aide. "Inform the task force. Ms. Vance's plan for the Overwatch is approved, effective immediately. Her team has full operational command. No interference." The mission that followed was a masterclass in precision warfare. From a hide site nearly 2 kilometers away, Eleanor and her spotter orchestrated the battle like a deadly symphony. Over the course of 4 hours, she eliminated 8 sentries guarding the high-value target's meeting location. Each shot was a whisper of death, fired through narrow gaps in walls or timed with gusts of wind to mask the sound. Her longest confirmed engagement that day was a staggering 1,987 meters, a shot that passed through an open doorway to neutralize a target before he could raise an alarm. Because of her flawless overwatch, the SEAL and Ranger teams were able to infiltrate the compound without a single shot being fired in their direction, capturing all 6 high-value targets and a treasure trove of intelligence. The operation prevented 3 major planned attacks and was hailed as a textbook success. Back in Norfolk, General Finch did more than just sign off on the after-action report. He personally wrote and submitted the citation for Eleanor Vance to receive the Silver Star, specifically noting her extraordinary skill and valor under pressure, which were directly responsible for the preservation of friendly forces and overwhelming mission success. More than that, he returned a changed man, pushing for reforms that prioritized proven field experience over service records. 3 months later, Eleanor received a formal request, not for another mission, but to become the lead civilian instructor for the Special Forces Sniper Course at Fort Bragg. She accepted. Her legend was no longer just a collection of ghost stories whispered in hushed tones. It was now part of the official curriculum, her legacy passed down to a new generation of warriors. And the rifle, her museum piece, she still has it. That single day in the dust of Afghanistan wasn't just about 6 impossible shots. It was a powerful reminder that true expertise isn't defined by age, gender, or the rank on your collar. It's forged in the crucible of experience, measured in moments of impossible pressure, and revealed not through words of authority, but through deeds of undeniable skill. Respect is something that has to be earned, and sometimes it's earned at over a mile away. Have you ever seen someone completely underestimated because of how they looked? What would you have thought if you were one of those soldiers watching that standoff between the old woman and the general? Do you believe that in a world obsessed with the new, we sometimes forget the profound value of experience? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We value every single perspective and ask that everyone communicates with respect. If this story reminded you that legends walk among us, hit that like button and subscribe for more stories about the quiet professionals who get the job done. Share this with someone who believes that true strength isn't always the loudest voice in the room. We read every single one of your comments, and they mean the world to us. More stories about battlefield legends and incredible displays of skill are waiting on your screen. Click on one of those videos to watch next, and we'll see you tomorrow with another story that needs to be told.